very close. Let me do this. Let me do this. The hyper. Okay.
Which microphone? Which one?
Okay. Yes. Try that. Show up. Susan, it's, you got notified there. Oh, that's the same one again? Hold on, I want you to have this one. Sorry. Share. Share. Go. Go. Try that. And then take. Not that way, should be the newest. There.
Good evening, everyone. Is it possible that everyone can take the seats at this point? We'd like you all to take part in one conversation that's going to be the evening's program. And I am Ted Selker. I am the chair of BayCHI. And I am here to welcome you to our first in-person get-together, party, program, and whatever else you want to make it since COVID, since March of 2020. It's really incredible to be here. It's I'd forgotten how loud it gets when just a few of us get a chance to be together and talk with each other. And I think that I am getting I think that I am getting a lot when I'm on Zoom with all of you, and I appreciate all of you coming to the BayCHI programs on Zoom. But wow, what we have now is we have the chance to start having in-person meetings as we want. This is a place that is willing to have us. Thank you, Joy Mountford, for who isn't here to take the bow, but she's our host for the evening, and she's willing to have us here often. I'm probably going to have us go up to a place in San Francisco in December where we're going to have a field trip again. These field trips we've had to the air traffic control and to Intuitive Surgical have been very successful, a lot of fun. And any of you that are interested in thinking about or organizing such things, great. Can we have the slides possibly? As we're contemplating other things about BayCHI, I want you all to know that the third Tuesday of the month, we have a CHI birds of a feather around careers in CHI. And you can come and mentor, you can come and mentee, whatever you'd like. We have these badges that you could have put on today, but probably didn't, saying maybe you could hire or be hired. And so the other thing I recognized when I started putting this program together with Nancy and Susan was that all of our systems from years of putting together, we have careers, we take credit cards, we have a bag full of money in the other room where we can sign you up. I really hope you re-sign up. It's big $20 a year. And we are slowly needing more money and become a member and help us out. Our programming, as you know, is world class. We have, this year we've had, Ben Schneiderman and his book, and Don Norman and his new book, and it's a lot of fun. We are also interested in all of you thinking about the possibility of being more part of the organization. So on the first Thursday of the month, we get together. It's called Steering Committee, and you can see it on the BayCHI thing. And it's 7:30. We start with checking in. What have we been doing in the last month? So it's a way to get to know each other. It's on Zoom. It's not a big, it's 1 hour. And then we talk about things we could do to make this place better. For example, in the last year and a half, me and Edwin Lee, who's busy helping people get in here, updated the consulting list. We updated the resume list. I'm not sure those helped, but we are interested in doing other things. One of the things we did is we got some light editing on all of our old videos. So we now have more people having watched by maybe 4 or 5 times, having watched the videos online on our YouTube feed and on our BayCHI than ever were there. And so that's really gratifying. And I guess I also want to say, just, think about, taking on a light responsibility if you want, maybe helping with social media, maybe helping with, I don't know, whatever you want, refreshments, maybe using the square to take people's credit cards. But anyway, we're hoping to meet in person as much as possible from here on. Now, enough of that blather. I just wanted to say that this is a very special evening for BayCHI because we've had people that really punched in this organization. And Richard Anderson, I'm told, is really at the top of that list. Now he's gone, and there's a memorial this evening, and I am not here to run that part of the meeting. Nancy and Susan are here to start with the technology that we've had for so many years, and also the newer technology that we have today. And thank you again for coming. And Nancy, please.
Okay. I'm gonna have to do that yet. That later. We're fine. We're fine. Sure, I'll stand
Nancy
here.
will go around the phone. The audience, Zoom land. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand and we'll bring you the right.
So this is a really interesting challenge for us because do I need this one? Okay. It's a really interesting challenge for us because we haven't done a hybrid meeting of this type before. And how many hands do I have to hold the microphone, my phone that's broadcast? It's okay. We'll see what we do. I'm not going to talk very long tonight. As you all know, we're going to be remembering Richard Anderson, who was a friend of many of us. And I hope for those who didn't know him, you get a really full picture of what an interesting guy he was. As Ted has already introduced BayCHI, we want to make sure you remember that $20 annual fee. You could pay for 5 years ahead and just send $100. That would work. And we'll keep track of it. And we are part of the larger ACM SIG-Chi, which Richard was very active in also. And so we'll hear more about that. And I think Ted mentioned most of these things. And so here we go. Here's our man, Richard, visible here. And Susan Wolf is going to lead us and guide us through many stories from many contributors this evening to help us remember all the wonderful and terrible things that were Richard.
I'm confused.
So now what? I'm going to do this at the end.
Oh, yeah.
At the end
At the end of the night.
Well, when we get to a good stuff.
Ah, okay. This technology stuff is like crazy. Let me see if I can figure out what to do. And one of the things I'm going to do is stop sharing for a moment and switch back to just talk amongst yourselves for a second. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's try this again. Okay, and now I have to close this. Let me just close this so you can't see this.
You can X out of that. There you go. Now
I
you should be
know.
able to pull that down. Or
There we
There we
go.
go.
There we go.
Okay.
That was difficult. Anyway, thanks so much for coming along tonight. Many of you may have actually found out that Richard passed away from a LinkedIn message that I had sent out shortly after I found out. What we're going to be doing tonight is we are going to be sharing a whole bunch of stories from people. And we have people here who have known him forever from BayCHI, like I did. I met him through BayCHI. A number of you have met him through BayCHI. We're going to be sharing a lot of different stories this evening. And so we have a number of speakers that have known him in various guises, and we'll be just gossiping, I guess. I also am going to interject just a few quotes from people who, let's see, what can I do to get rid of this? Let me just put that over there. Just have a number of different quotes from people that I'll just kind of be sharing. This one's the longest one, so I'll leave it up here the longest. Don Norman wanted to be able to participate. He's actually in Italy, as are two of our other speakers, as it turns out tonight. But he did pass along this message that he wanted to share. Oh, now I have to put my glasses on? Yeah. Okay. Richard was one of the often invisible hidden powers behind the scenes, making the Bay Area CHI talk so wonderful, creative, and informative, helping to push the field forward in numerous ways. I met him early on, so long ago I can't put a date to it, the late 1980s or early 90s. He was a great moderator of panels, many of which I listened to, and in some of which where I was a participant. I was always impressed with his calm and calming moderation, guiding discussions even when they threatened to boil over, and reigniting them when they appeared to be dying down. He made it look easy, but for anyone who has tried to moderate a bunch of opinionated, disagreeing panelists, it can be a mentally and emotionally difficult one. And yes, and we're gonna hear about some people who have been on various panels with him. When he had a debilitating illness, his friends quickly gathered together to assist him. We had all hoped that he had made a full recovery. When I moved away from the Bay Area, I didn't get to see him very much, but we still did communicate via email. I was looking forward to more fruitful interactions with him. His death is a great loss to the community, irreplaceable. So that's a message from Don Norman. And what I'm going to do now is hand it back to someone who you haven't heard from yet. I'd like to introduce Nancy to you.
I'll give you my phone so you can do the B-roll. Hi. Okay, so now in theory, my slides are going to come up. Oh, so let's figure out how we're going to do that.
Hold this for a second. You know this is going to go tonight, don't you?
We're going to get better at it by the time we get through 8 people, you know. They're here somewhere. Not that one, the other one. That one. Yeah, okay. Let's do slides. Okay. Share. Ooh la la. There it is. Yeah.
Nothing to it.
All right, Susan, thank you so much. So this evening, I'm going to try to speak briefly about my contacts with Richard over the period 1992 to 2009, and I'll let other people take the 2009 forward part. And mostly I'm going to talk about Richard in the context of BayCHI and community. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Nancy Frischberg. I go by Nancy F online a lot. And I'm a member of BayCHI since 1991, which was hard because I didn't live here in 1991. I was still living in Connecticut and working at IBM in New York. But I received the newsletter and I followed all the announcements. And in 93, I actually relocated to the Bay Area, so I was able to participate. And the picture there is me at Chi 92 in Monterey. Thank you very much, Ben Schneiderman, for being a photographer of all of our events. So some of these images are from Ben. And the noteworthy thing about BayCHI and Richard is 140 programs he put together. That's not 140 speakers, because sometimes there were 2 distinct talks or maybe 3 in a single night, or there were 4 or 5 panelists on some topic. So that's a lot of people to keep coordinated by date and time. And then the other amazing thing about, I got a close-up view because Richard let me guest host when he was traveling away from the Bay Area on a second Tuesday. Those of you who used to attend at Park will notice the stairway that in the early fall when it still is light. And Richard taught me that you could have a potpourri of topics. And by the end of 10 years or 15 years, you probably had another MA's worth of great knowledge in your head from all these diverse topics. I'm just putting a few of them down here that I noticed, like groupware, accessibility, mobile devices, interviews with old friends and new people, branding, invisible interfaces, enterprise software, the ROI of usability. Repeat that 140 times with different topics. And this is the same stairwell, but from the other angle at night and a little bit wet. But he contacted and brought us together from diverse organizations and with lots of different kinds of people, big companies like IBM, Apple, Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, smaller companies, some of which have been absorbed, even if they were big before. So I remember Aardvark gave a talk, and a few months later, we heard they got gobbled up by Google. Waze gave a talk before anybody knew who they were. People from Park talked about very futuristic work. People from Sun Microsystems and the non-existent now Silicon Graphics. But we had several talks from them, and they were the high-end graphics organization. We also had people from all the universities in the area and beyond, and other nonprofits like Bootstrap Institute with Doug Engelbart. I know there were at least 2 talks I came across where Doug was the main speaker. And Richard brought in creatives of all sorts. And so we had musicians from time to time, or visual artists, architects, and other kinds of designers then, online designers. Richard kept at least 2 blogs where he recorded a lot of interesting ideas. One of them was people.well.com, where he was RIAnder, and that one has been emptied out. So if you go there, you see his title or his area of specialization, user or customer experience practice, management and organizational strategy, with a major focus on social innovation. But other than those headings, home, work, whatever, there's nothing left in there. And I think Susan will talk a little bit more to some of that. His other blog was the Blogspot blog, and the way he characterized that one was on experience design, practice management, and organizational strategy. And that one has content that was new as of 2019. Now, some of you may or may not know Richard and I and several other HCI people and then film buffs were part of a film discussion group. I know Claudia showed up there several times. You're in the audience here today. Among Richard's favorite movies was anything French, and of course, all the Before movies with Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke. So Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and what's the third one? Before Midnight? I can't remember. Anyway, he loved them all. And here he is. And several of these people in our discussion group are now retired, but were film professors in San Francisco State or at the College of Marin. Sorry, back again. Back. Let me go back. Okay. And you can see Richard, I've circled his face here in large groups of people. This was DCamp in 2004. Thank you, Stacy Habino and Rashmi Sinha, for bringing together about 300 people for an amazing weekend. And we all got to do things outdoors and indoors. And it was a kind of an unconference treatment where people who had something to share could share it, and those who wanted to learn from them could show up and learn. And there we all were learning. You may have read already that Richard was involved in 3 conferences called Designing the User Interface, and I was lucky enough to be helping him with the one on '05. And we had an amazing program. I met some wonderful people that I'm still in touch with that I didn't know from before because they're not from the Bay Area. And I think this was an amazingly successful conference. And Richard, in that picture, I think looks particularly well. Richard was also a great host and enjoyed food. And some of you may have been at the Christmas parties where we made cookies. You were there, yes. I saw you. There's other pictures that have your face in them, Claudia. So he was willing to do experimentation and improvisation with food and share it with others. And he did win the social impact, he won the Lifetime Service Award at CHI 2007. And we're going to hear from somebody who made sure that award got given to him in just a few minutes. So I do want to remind us all that today, just by serendipity and, whatever kind of luck, today is World Mental Health Day. And the motto is mental health is a human right. And so you'll get to hear a little bit more about why it's so relevant and what an amazing coincidence it is that we are celebrating Mental Health Day today as we're remembering Richard. I'll stop there. That's all right. You did great.
I held the phone really well. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for bringing back some of those memories. I'm going to now stop sharing for one moment and find something else I want to share. I want to just share this. Okay, we've heard. Just want to share before I introduce the next speaker. I just want to share a few more quotes. I appreciated Richard's contribution as my teacher, BayCHI colleague, and friend. I think that's pretty succinct and to the point. So I have to read all of these. Yeah. I met Richard when he was, to date myself, the Ed Sullivan of the BayCHI world. As program chair and curator, BayCHI has always had a really big show, an amazing lineup of interface leaders, willing, if not eager, to share their insights and doings. Then I discovered we had common Iowa roots. Over diner breakfasts, we conspired to do something together, and of course never managed, either of us, to take the next steps to realize our delightful but concocted fantasies. And the last one I'll share now, I've long admired Richard. While I was in grad school, his intellect and interviewing panache inspired many of us in the HCI community. Eventually, I had a chance to take over a fraction of his workload, coordinating speakers. Since the field had evolved by the early noughts, nobody could have sustained his particular style of conversationally engaging with the leaders of the field. When he was suffering from his idiopathic illness, it touched me to see the community come together to provide some support. He'll be remembered and missed. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later as well. All right, and with that note, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy, and I'm going to find her slides, and that we will, let's see, share screen. Hold on. I had them all open. Where'd it go? Just talk amongst yourselves again.
Right. Okay. Okay. So if you look at some of the impact that Richard had, I actually met Richard not here in the Bay Area through BayCHI, but actually through this local SIGs. Because before I came back to the Bay Area, I actually lived in the Chicago area. And when I was in the Chicago area, we were working on setting up a local area SIG for Chicago, for the Chicago area, which we at that time called Chi Squared because it was by Chicago Chi. Anyways, Richard was involved with SIG-Chi. So for those of you who don't know, it's ACM is kind of the parent organization. SIG-Chi is a special interest group within ACM. And then BayCHI is a local SIG. So you can kind of think of it as grandparent, parent, and grandchildren. And so we were joining the grandchildren of the many grandchildren of ACM and the kids of SIG-Chi. And Richard, he didn't just say, oh, there should be more local SIGs around. He really stepped up and he got engaged with ACM, SIG-Chi, and he brought the people who were interested in starting up these local SIGs together. So when there was a SIG-Chi conference, the leaders of these from these other new SIGs got together and we talked about what were some of our needs in terms of being able to tactically and practically run a new SIG. I think it's right now, today in the time that we're in now, we think, oh, you want to have a meeting, you just, throw up a meetup and, you get some company to donate some space and then boom, you have a meeting and it's no problem. Back in the day, over 20 years ago, you had to think about, well, how are you going to get a website hosted? Where was that going to be? Is it, is it going to be off of some company's name or is it actually going to have its own organization? Is it going to show that it's affiliated to ACM or not? And if it costs money to host that website, where is that money coming from? And do you have to be, a nonprofit organization that you have to create yourself and then file tax? This is kind of overwhelming stuff, right? So Richard really helped pave the way for all these local SIGs to be able to happen and to have ACM support in not having to do some of those things that you want to avoid and ignore, like filing taxes. But still doing the appropriate thing, like ACM files the taxes for you. So you could see, back when we were starting in Chi Squared, I used to think of there were mostly like around 3 local SIGs in the States at the time, maybe. Everyone knew about BayCHI. There was one in Boston, and then there was one in, I want to say, Seattle. And there were other ones that were starting to come up, but those were like the 3 main ones. Today, there are 68 local chapters in 36 countries representing over 4,000 members. That's pretty impressive. As was already mentioned as well, Richard was the program chair for many years. He was the first program chair. He helped found BayCHI as well, right? So from 1989 to 2002, he served as the BayCHI monthly program chair. And, BayCHI offers a number of activities and services, but most people know BayCHI for their monthly programs. And that's basically the cornerstone of our organization. And it's the thing that brings us together. And it's always been the second Tuesday of every month. It used to be at Park forever. And then with COVID, it went online for a while. And now we're being a little creative and seeing where things are going to go from here. But as you can see, there have been many, many, many well-known speakers across numerous aspects of UX. Nancy talked about many of them. There's some other ones listed here, like hypertext, voice, multimedia, groupware, visualization, interfaces for kids, web TV. These are things that we don't even think about today, but back in the day, these were things that were just starting to begin. And you can see the list of the number of people that he brought in. This is just an example of some of the folks who came in, folks like Jeff Johnson, Bill Buxton, Ted Nelson, Tom Moran, Andy Hirschfield, Brenda Laurel, Guy Kawasaki, Bruce Togg, Marilyn Tai, Tremaine, Bonnie Nardi, Jacob Nielsen, and so on. And these are people who have books that have defined our industry, and they were all speakers at BayCHI, right? And because Richard brought them in, and so at the time when Richard was the program chair, basically people thought of Richard was BayCHI. right? Because he was the one who held us all together. I would actually just mention that, as was mentioned with the quote from Paul, and as Nancy mentioned too, you know, when Richard did step down as program chair, I was actually, I think I was actually BayCHI chair at the time. And so we had to transition to other program chairs. Well, we had at least 2 program chairs, and then we had other people doing other supporting roles, all of the things that Richard had done by himself. It took many people and many volunteers to fill those big shoes. The other thing that was mentioned, Don Norman mentioned this, Richard was a master interview. And here's actually a not so good picture, but really? I thought it was pulled from actually a video shot, but it was an early days Instagram builder. So this was from a conversation or an interview he had with Don Norman and John Kolkel. And I think John will talk as well. And one of the things that you notice, if you go back and you look at the program, the list of programs that Richard had that occurred during the time that Richard was program chair, whenever he had an interview, it didn't say interview with someone else. It said a conversation with someone else. And I think that was a lot of what was behind Richard's secret sauce, right? That he treated interviews like conversations. And if we were lucky enough to be in the audience, then we got to just sit in and listen, eavesdrop in on this interesting conversation. And again, you see a ton of other folks who participated, other well-known folks in our field who have helped define our field. I did have to include this side note at the bottom. I was going through some of the older listings and reading through, and I just stumbled across this and it made me laugh, so I had to include it. And so if you look back on the August 13, 2002 program, and you look at the description of Richard down at the bottom, he actually wrote about himself. Richard is working with Marta, who actually was our logistics volunteer at the time, to have BayCHI offer margaritas in the auditorium entryway prior to each BayCHI program, and to have Paul McCartney publicly acknowledge that Richard was the source of the Beatles hit Yesterday. He is hoping the bad sunburn on his legs heals prior to August 13, so he will be comfortable sitting down with Aaron to do this interview. So sometimes I think he just included those things to see if we read the description, but it kind of just speaks to Richard's humor. All right, so I'm just going to wrap it up with an end in Richard's style. So for those of you who were around when Richard was around, he used what is called an overhead projector. For those of you who may not know what an overhead projector is, there's an example here. I think Nancy will demonstrate its use later. And he often did at the beginning of every program, he kind of did this little reveal with the paper to show with his handwritten note. And so in Richard's style, I would say, thank you, Richard, for your service to BayCHI, for building up our community both locally and globally, and for challenging us to keep on learning. We miss you, but we will never forget you.
Thank you. I don't have any of those reveals here. Sorry. I guess I'm doing a good enough job trying to reveal these things. I'm doing it without knowing it. Okay. Share screen again. Let's see if I can do this any better. Okay, so that was. Okay, just a few more quotes before I introduce. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know what they're seeing. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So this is from Steve Portugal. I benefited from Richard's community building before there was a web, hardly an internet. when there were no options or opportunities outside what he helped us, outside what he helped bring us all. It was crucial for me at an early stage of my career. Over the years, I got to know Richard in a variety of capacities as he encouraged me, edited me as a columnist, explored the ways that us consultants can provide value in a growing and challenging market. I'm grateful for his friendship, and I have so much respect for all that he accomplished and the way he went about that. And I was the one who introduced Steve to Richard. So I was the one who gave Steve his first job. Yeah. And Dave, I wasn't sure you were going to make it. So would you like to read your quote? I pulled that from what you wrote. I
take advantage. Richard was the heart and soul of BayCHI for so many years, and it was a privilege and sincere pleasure to spend time with him during that period. His legacy runs deep, and his good nature, in spite of significant challenges, remains an inspiration.
Thank you. You didn't know you were going to get called on, did you? Okay. And one more. Besides BayCHI, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to spend time consulting with him in the late noughts. He was both inspirational and personable. The UX world is richer for his work or with his loss. He will be missed. Okay, and with that, do we have Jennifer online? Okay. She is online. Then Jennifer, we need to make sure that you can share your screen.
It's okay. I don't have any slides.
Well, then you don't have any screen to share. Perfect.
No screen share. Just let me know when you're ready.
We're ready.
Okay, so thank you. I don't have any slides, but I did write a little something about Richard. And just so you know, it's super early here. I'm in Europe, and Richard might be surprised to know I woke up so early to share something about him. You know, he could be a bit selfless at times, but he's also probably, you know, having a nice laugh at my bedhead and pajama bottoms, you know. We met at the turn of the century. Richard was curious about Viant, where I was the design lead at the time. We met over coffee and discussed the firm, its culture, and how he could contribute. Before this meeting, I only knew him as the BayCHI guy. I had attended meetings since about 96, you know, not everyone, but many. And straight away at this first meeting, Richard put me at ease. I'd soon learned this was a great gift of his ability to put others, even total strangers, at ease. This was attached to his empathy, in my view. If I had to select one word that embodies Richard, it would be empathy. He had it in the truckloads, and it was seemingly limitless. Richard's empathy enabled him to understand not only the people we were designing for at any given time, but also the colleagues and teams he collaborated with and mentored in human-centered design. And by the way, while we call it human-centered design now, it wasn't so long ago it was user-centered design. Richard was among the first I heard question the term user, implying it's derogatory, is akin to drug dealers, what drug dealers call their clients. Again, his empathy at play here. We continued working together after Viant SF's closure in 2001, co-authoring a paper with the awesome Jay Joichi for the DIS conference in 2002. Richard and I co-presented the paper at the British Museum in London, where the conference was being held. We were all thrilled to have the paper accepted. Then Richard and I were so excited to meet up in London and present it together. It felt like, you know, little kids unwrapping a gift for their birthday. We continued collaborating on various projects and sharing dinners at our homes with our partners and friends. Those were always joyous occasions of wonderful food. As mentioned, he was a great cook and enjoyed making food, and great conversation and laughter. Richard's empathy never wavered, And so it struck me exceptionally hard to learn when he experienced such a rough time when his health worsened. This great man, who was a conduit of so much experience and knowledge to so many, didn't receive nearly enough empathy when he was most in need. My heart still really hurts for this time. During this era, I was already living abroad and helped as I was able to from afar. After some time, I was relieved to learn Richard began working again, and as usual, putting his experience to use alongside his natural empathy. He focused on the small matter of redesigning the US healthcare system. Richard also began teaching again, another incredible gift of his. So in my view, let's not be sad about his passing. Richard lived a very full life, which is all of us and anything all of us could wish for. He also gave everything he had to this community, and we are all the wealthier for it. Let's celebrate Richard's life, honor the legacy of his teachings, and cherish that part of him that lives on in us. And of course, share it with others, which ultimately is what Richard would want. Thank you.
Thank you. We're applauding. We're applauding. I don't, can you hear the applause?
No.
Okay. Rest
Okay,
assured,
thank you.
we're applauding. Okay. Thank you for getting up early or staying up late, depending upon your perspective. We have a few more people who are in very early time zones. And so I think what I am going to do is, let me do this again. Go. That's the wrong one. Jeez. Hold on, sorry about this. Share screen. Oh, here it is. Thank you. I'm glad somebody's paying attention. That's not the right one either. Where'd it go? Don't say. Sorry. Yeah, I really do know what I'm doing. I promise. I know it doesn't look like it, but I do. It is. Share that. Why is it going to that? Yeah, I absolutely 100%, 100%. For the little paper, I have a much better plan. Jonathan, it's over to you. That's going to be my plan. How do we get?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Richard was a colleague and a very good friend of mine since about 2000. He's been a monumental influence to both me and the design world. I just want to share 3 short things, and keeping it short because it is 5 in the morning where I am at in Amsterdam. I want to just talk about my meeting with him at SIG-Chi, my reconnection with him in 2009, and just a quick word about his design legacy, which sounds like a contradiction because it was a huge legacy. I first met Richard in 2001 when I was appointed as the design community liaison to the ACM SIG-Chi Executive Committee. The committee at that time was quite cold to the design community, except of course for Wendy Mackay and Marilyn Tremaine, who appointed me. Nevertheless, at these SIG-Chi executive meetings, Richard was a source of support and sustenance, helping me to bring in the design community into Chi. This was eventually a successful, if temporary success. The pinnacle of that success is when I teamed up with Terry Swack and Alan Chalmers to form the conference series we knew as the DUX Conference, Designing for the User Experience. For the initial 2003 conference, I tapped the most natural selection of program chair, as did Terry, and we had the classic pairing of Richard Anderson and John Sapolsky. That created one of the most fulfilling combinations of design and HCI I had ever seen. And indeed, that continued on for 2 more Ducks conferences as well. Moving on to the middle of 2009, when he reappeared to us, the extent and story of his illness, I'll leave others to discuss. I only want to mention that many people reached out and helped Richard. And many people were also rejective of his seeming lack of gratitude or some lack of graciousness. And I only want to mention to these people, to these kind people and his friends, that Richard was always quite ill and struggled with his illness even when we thought he was back to normal. I want to relate just one story. He often, for many years, I acted as a post box for Richard's mail, and he would come to pick up his mail. He often came to pick up his mail while I was at work, and he met with my late husband, Morris Taylor, and they enjoyed exploring the city together. They had many museums, and they ate many lunches together. This time when he was homeless, especially early on when Richard was clearly not himself, Morris gave him a lot of very important emotional and as well as material support. One night, Richard came over for dinner with my husband and a couple of friends. And I was a little scared how it would go because of Richard's mental state at the time. The dinner actually went great, and Richard was just his old self. And I also said to Morris, wow, Richard is back as like he was in the old days. And Morris corrected me. He said, no, you don't understand the tremendous effort it took him to give us a good time this evening. And that was indeed going to be kind of the route he would be following for the rest of his life, making a tremendous effort to give us a great experience. I just wanted to say then, in closing, in his last days, he sent me what I believe were among some of his last text messages. And still, even then, among the desperation, there were still cogent and powerful pleas for the design of medicine to be better suited for giving the medical profession the tools they needed to really care for a patient. It was still a testament to his passion for great design. I continue to read and study his blogs, and I'm going to make sure his design legacy continues with a new book I'm writing on design and UX. Hopefully it will be a fresh look on how design can innovate products and services, which will draw heavily on the lessons learned from my friend, Richard Anderson. Richard, may your legacy continue to bloom long after you have passed away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Seeing as I'm doing so well with the technology, I think what we'll do is we'll come back to the quotes later. I think what I'd like to do now is I'd like to, and I know, John, I said you were next, but I'm going to we're doing kind of in time zone order. So I'm going to let Marilyn go next, if you don't mind, and you're after. Okay. So over to you, Marilyn.
Okay, I don't have any slides or any screen share because I got contacted today and I had a lot of other things on my plate. But I've known Richard Anderson since the beginning, partly because I was a key person in HCI from its beginning. And to my feeling is the top local chapter in HCI was BayCHI. And that's in part because Richard Anderson was so key in doing a lot of work with it back in the very earlier days. I sort of left HCI in about 2001 when one of the universities that employed me insisted that I can't have any other things besides work at the university. And that was because they wanted me to be department chair. So I apologize for stepping down from being chair of HCI a long time ago, but I was pushed pretty hard. In any case, my memories of Richard is every time we had many exchanges of email and many conversations. And I was very happy for him to be on the HCI board. I've always been in the early stages when HCI was formed. I was always a member of the board in some position. And he was there, and it made all the meetings just that much more interesting and exciting. And I just remember every week, every day almost, a question about this, a question about that. And he was such an interesting and funny and exciting person to be around, and so smart and so quick. And I left California many years ago before even SIGCHI was formed, but it was always great to go back. It was always great to go to a BayCHI meeting, and it was always great to meet up with Richard Anderson. What a wonderful, kind, and interesting person. You don't run into those people every day, and you don't run into the kinds of people who are all those things, and you esteem them, but a lot of people just ignore them. And he was there not doing it because he wanted to be anybody great or anybody special. He was doing them because he was excited about the field. He was excited about helping people, excited about changing things. And that was so nice and so decent. And yes, at some point, I worked to make sure that he got an award from SIGCHI because he so deserved it. Sometimes a lot of people like him are ignored because you get all the people who want to be famous and push themselves. But he wasn't that kind of person. He was just one of these incredibly smart, very interesting, very creative souls. And I'm so happy that I've known him in my life. I think I'll leave it at this because I haven't written any slides.
No slides were needed. Thank you so much. So I didn't introduce Marilyn Tremaine Manti. We heard about Marilyn from Stacy, and before that was Jonathan Arnowitz, for any of you who didn't know his last name because my slides weren't working. Okay, now we're going to introduce John Kolko. Okay, most people know who John Kolko is, a man who needs no introduction, so I'm not introducing you.
I appreciate that. Please let me know if you could see my slides okay. And
Perfect.
thanks Susan and Nancy for putting this together. I just have a couple thoughts I'd like to share, and thanks for giving me some time this evening. I worked with Richard on Interactions magazine from about 2007 to about 2010. And I remember very much actually when I applied to be editor-in-chief of the magazine, I got a message back from Gary Olson that said essentially like, yeah, we'd like you to be editor-in-chief, but I'm paraphrasing poorly. We're afraid you're going to fuck it up, and so we're going to bring in this adult Richard to sort of chaperone you. And so he did. And so I got to work with Richard over the next 3 or so years. And what you're seeing here is actually a very crappy resolution photo from the first day we met in ACM headquarters. This is the two of us brainstorming what it is we were to go do. And it's a little difficult to see. Again, the quality is pretty bad, but if you kind of poke at these are names of folks that we were hoping would give us some of their time, volunteer with the magazine. I'm sure you might recognize yourself or others here. And the majority of these came from Richard, because again, I was like 12 years old or something like that when I was asked, or when I asked to do this. And I just appreciated just the wealth of networking ability he had. I mean, he knew everybody, and he didn't just know them. He was sort of honed in. Like, had he been a bad person, he would be the kind of person who would just pick at something terrible, but he's a great person. And he was able to share great stories about each of these people. And just a story about this particular photo. At the end of the day, toward the end of the day, somebody kind of poked their head in the conference room and said, I don't think you're supposed to have those Post-its on the glass. And that was sort of the demeanor of the ACM office at that point. So I think this was like a preview of what was to come, I suppose, in terms of the way that we approach things. But in August of 2007, Richard and I published the vision and structure we had for the magazine. And this is not, revolutionary. We built on a lot of the great predecessors we had, but really we were trying to support John Ryan, Frank, Bill Heffley, and Brad Meyer's vision. And so what I'll just read this very briefly, because it's probably too small to read on your screen. We see a world rich with culture, emotion, and human connection. The human-built world has afforded us of beauty, sublimity, and resonance. And through our advancements to technology come advances in society. At the center of these advances are interactions, conversations, connections, collaborations, and relationships within and across multiple disciplines with and without technology. The language aside, the ideas there, I think, are around people and not around really technology at all. And that was something that Richard cared a great deal about. And from here, we started publishing. And I think we were sort of both astounded at the level of access that being editors-in-chief of a magazine like Interactions gave us. This was one of Richard's favorite sort of successes early on in our experience here, about maybe a year into it. We got Richard Seymour to contribute to the magazine, and we did it because Richard just asked him. And like, Richard didn't know Richard, but he just, I think, called him up or sent him an email and said, "Hey, would you do this?" You'll also notice that like the article has this like, or F off and do something less dangerous. And that was actually another sort of point of contention, which is that Richard and I did not play very well with ACM at this point. We were still sort of learning what we could and couldn't do. And everybody thought I was going to be the problem child. But in fact, Richard was pushing an awful lot of this, like, how far can we take things? This is us getting our hands slapped for using an expletive. And Richard Seymour was generous enough to allow us to edit his words to have an asterisk. And sort of like keep rolling with that. In September and October of 2008, the Bardzels submitted a fantastic article, which was about the nature of virtual worlds. Back then, it wasn't exactly new, but Second Life was starting to be sort of a thing. And the article was about sex in virtual worlds. And these were the images that Jeff Bardzel had sent us. And these were actually some of the tamer ones. And this was the note we got from, again, from the ACM saying, you can't publish this. And I remember Richard going to town on it. It was not actually me who was so adamant about whatever you want to call it, free speech, I suppose, because Richard felt very passionately that no matter what the research work was, because it had such a human impact, it was worth publishing. And he's right, because the piece was excellent. And this was a consistent theme of, that we would probably do something we weren't supposed to. We'd get yelled at, and it would be, both of us, but for the most part, Richard, who would get very, very animated about doing what is right for the authors and what is right for the sort of implicit nature of the work itself. This is the body of work that we published. We published 18 issues. We were very, very proud of them. And, Richard articulated to me both while we were doing it, but then after some time had passed and I caught up with him again, how much it meant to him to create these works, because I think just like with some folks mentioned when he ran a conference or when he brought together a group of people in a conversation, he was in very many ways a curator or an editor as a person. He curated good ideas into a package, and each one of these covers, which represents some articles, represents a curation of ideas. I'll just sort of end with what I think was one of the biggest ideas, because I caught up with him toward the end of his life, and we were reminiscing a little bit about Interactions. And this was one of our covers that turns out he was very, very pleased with. It was toward the end of our experience as editors. This is in June of 2010. And the cover story is by Hugh, who's on the call here, along with Rajiv, Shelley, and Paul. And the article is a phenomenal article. Nicely done, Hugh. Appreciate it. And it spoke to Richard because it reframes and recasts the sort of health industry as being less about what we might know it as. I go to a doctor, I'm given pills, etc., and more about wellness, about self-management, about being able to sustain, being able to be a whole person, and being seen in context. And this particular chart that is an excerpt from the article, I actually think if you look at emerging there, really summarizes the way that Richard, I think, wanted desperately for the healthcare industry to be as he was experiencing, the column on the left, very, very cognizant that the world could be a certain different way. This was one of his favorite issues. This was one of his favorite pieces. So I'll sort of leave y'all with this, and this is how I remember Richard, which is this is actually a picture from, I think, Kai Florence. I had a hard time putting together the years here, but my sort of memory of Richard as a human experiencing life was eating food and drinking, in this case, probably shitty grappa, some kind of disgusting wine, and just talking about, the nature of all the different things that we're discussing tonight. So Richard, thank you for the impact you've had on my life. I miss you, and I hope I'll see you again sometime.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right. I don't need my slides now because the rest of the people are in the room. So up next, we have Peter Merholz. And I'm going to ask you to stand here so that the audience can see you. Oh, dear. You're going to read the whole thing? Okay.
Thank you, Susan. My Richard story is a little different than the ones we've been hearing, in that I didn't meet, I'm going to take out my iPhone because I have some notes. I didn't meet Richard through BayCHI. When I was 25, 1997, I was working at Studio Archetype as a web developer. And I had read my Don Norman and I had read my Richard Saul Wurman. And somehow I had been made aware that there was a class you could take in this stuff. And in 1997, from October to December, I took Richard's user-centered design and usability engineering night class at the College of Notre Dame. It was through UC Extension, but at the College of Notre Dame, I'd get on Caltrain and come down. I didn't have a car. Maybe I drove with friends. I don't know. To learn what this thing was, and it's literally the only formal instruction I've ever had in this work that we do. But to it, I credit, I started that class as a web developer and I came out as Studio Archetype's first ever interaction designer. I changed my title and that was what set me on the path that I've been on ever since. And I'm generally an autodidact, but Richard was one of the few people who I would call a mentor. I just wanted to say a couple other things. One thing and this has come out a lot, I think one thing I'll remember him for is his selflessness. Programming BayCHI, editing interactions, as we've just been hearing, the teaching he did with me, other ways he gave back. He always did work to advance this community, and that's something that I aspire to. And then a last thought, which is the last time I saw Richard, which wasn't a special thing necessarily. I didn't realize it would be the last time I'd see him. It was probably in 2017. It was definitely in Oakland, California, where I live and where I was working. And it was at a creative morning event, and which is mostly a bunch of millennials hanging out for breakfast, hearing some artists talk about, letterpress or whatever kind of hipster thing they were into at the time. And I don't remember who was speaking, but I saw Richard there. He was probably wearing his beret or some weird headwear in that Richard style. But it struck me that he drove from wherever the hell he was living at the time, somewhere out on the ocean, came all the way to Oakland early in the morning to sit in this room with 30 other folks that he didn't know, to learn something new, to just stay connected, stay involved, stay engaged. And that's something else that I also aspire to never stop learning, to never keep trying. He was always open and engaged and interested. And for that, that's how I will remember him, and I miss him. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll show a picture of him actually speaking at a Creative Mornings. You're next. You are.
So I have these cards now, like I prepared them in case winning the Oscar or something, but it's not going to happen. Yeah, this is Alp, and my last name is too long, so I don't use it. Yeah. But it's great to see some friends here. Jennifer, hi, way up there. in Europe, Jonathan as well. So before I start, we actually work together at Yahoo. I don't know if anybody mentioned it, but Richard was there as well at some point. So there was a fun experience beyond just BayCHI. But today we're celebrating Richard's life, and what could be a better place than here, BayCHI, with all the contribution he had done over the years. I think if there's one thing that we can all agree on, Richard was anything but ordinary in many ways. He was the kind of guy who could make an academic lecture sound like a discovery show, or make an observation feel like an epic adventure. Just like some of you, Stacy, my first meeting with Richard was over a phone when I was trying to set up KCCHI, Kansas City chapter of the SIG-Chi group. So he just called me and said, "I'd like to have an interview with you. You know, what do you guys do there in Midwest? Like, do you guys have any designers, or what's going on?" Because he was going to write an article, and there was at the time he was in charge of the local chapters, and I think he was puzzled by Kansas City chapter, but nonetheless it was great. And that was really surprising to me in many ways, because he opened the gateway immediately and gave incredible support. So one of the things, most people don't realize this, but coming from Midwest, BayCHI and overall the user interface community in the Bay Area had this glass wall. You couldn't easily get in and penetrate and become part of it. And so Richard actually opened the gate for that, and I'm so grateful for that. So he was a true thinker in many ways, the kind who could face multifaceted problems and look at it from different perspectives, and at the same time, you know, he could sit down and discuss the meaning of life over a cup of coffee. So, you know, we had great conversations many times. And he had a way of making even the most mundane topics seem fascinating, keeping you up in the air, like, is it this or that? And then puzzle you. I remember the time he turned a discussion on quantum physics into an organizational design and the similarities between the two, particularly on superposition quantum physics in multidisciplinary teams and how they actually have common ground. So the other thing is that, as some of you mentioned, let's not forget his keen observational skills, not just topics, but people as well. And some of you mentioned that he would just tune in and extract somebody's views without any bias. Himself was opinionated, but he would not bring it in. And I always admired it. It's not an easy thing to do. I think beyond his brilliance, Richard was a facilitator of ideas, debates, and friendship. And he was absolutely stunning at that. He had this uncanny ability to bring people together, whether it was just a BayCHI event or a cooking night, social clubs, or just a casual gathering at his place many times. He made sure that we all felt welcome, and there was never a dull moment when he was around. In his own quiet and private way, Richard left a mark on all of us, I think. He reminded us that life should be a blend of serious thoughts, laughter, deep observations, and random jokes. He encouraged us to think, to question, and cherish every moment, especially in his late years. So here's to Richard, our private thinker, our facilitator of fun, and our keenest observer. If he was watching at the moment, right now, he would probably say, okay, Alp, let's hear the other perspectives. Cheers. Cheers, Richard, we'll miss you.
You won the Oscar.
Yes.
The-
right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alp. And I'm gonna now hand it over to Jaime. This is Jaime Guerrero.
Thanks, Susan. No slides. So I met Richard in 1994. Like two other people here, I attended a usability engineering workshop at UC Berkeley Extension at Menlo College. And I was looking at the 4-inch binder of all the handouts that I didn't think to bring, but I was looking at it this morning, trying to find, there was only one article in that entire binder that was written by Richard Anderson, which tells you a lot of what you need to know about Richard that I guess all of us already know. So I came up with a couple of words. I'm just gonna read off words and then talk about it. So we've mentioned, other people have mentioned the word empathic, which is sort of a very key part of Richard's personality. I associate that also with activists, particularly in phase 2 of his life, which is post-catastrophe. I forgot to mention, so of course, Richard was just my instructor for 3 of those classes, but I didn't really know him as a person, instructor. But in 2011, when the word got out among the BayCHI mailing list about the catastrophe and his blog, My Real Life Unnecessary Nightmare, which of course I read, I arranged to meet up with him in Sausalito. We had dinner, and that began our actual friendship. And at the time, of course, as you all know, he was homeless and living in his car. And that began a period of 5 or 6 years where he would stay in my house and cat sit for me. That was sort of the exchange. But of course, he really liked not living in his car for a week or 2 when I was traveling. So that's when I really got to know Richard. But to continue the thought about empathy and activism, here's the thought. All of his work with BayCHI was Richard being Richard, which is about the user, the other people. It's really not, there's no ego there. It's all about him doing good to the others. But it changed when he, not so much during his crisis period, but say maybe 2013 or something, when his medical condition got a little better, his life stabilized, and he started working again. Now he became an activist. So suddenly the difference is empathy is you're feeling somebody else's pain. Suddenly he's feeling his own pain. I mean, what he did with that was different. I mean, it was the same, right, actually. But there was an interesting change of intensity when it's not just feeling somebody else's pain. Anyway, let me read off a couple other words. Earnest. Faith. This is a man with beliefs that he's pretty stubborn about. I mean, he sticks with them. So that's sort of an interesting dimension. Part of the faith, another word that comes to mind is romantic, and has a vision of life as it could or should be, the literary definition of the word romantic. Obviously kind as opposed to nice. He was really much more about being kind. So Socratic teacher is what I immediately picked up from him at the very beginning of our relationship as a teacher, in that he never had the answers. He said, here, read this other guy's paper, usually in the case of classes, or in the case of as a BayCHI host or a Chi host, he was never speaking. He was always getting the other guy to speak. So an interesting person in that he really was deflecting the spotlight somebody other than himself. I guess there's humility there. He would have made a terrific talk show host. And then just a personality or physical characteristics, the black blazer. This is something I think he started in the second phase of his life. I don't remember him doing this at BayCHI, but from 2011 on, he was never seen without a black blazer, never. Dinner, lunch, of course, making presentations. You know, he's very active in MedX, which I guess you'll talk about, Susan. Yeah, anyway, so that's all I have to say. The black blazer and the overhead.
Okay, thank you so much, honey. All right. I guess the last speaker is me. And I do have some slides, so I have to do this. Just talk amongst yourselves for a moment. Let's see.
You know, I'd be happy to just say one thing while you're looking.
Please do.
People mentioned how when Richard let go, there were so many different plates to spin. So I was one of the program chair coordinators, along with at that in the first cycle, Rashmi Sinha. And then she got busy and ended up selling her company to LinkedIn, and it was SlideShare. At any rate, I'm sorry to just say that I stepped into a role that Richard had really surfed so beautifully at a time when interaction design was just absolutely as sexy as it ever could have been. I'm sure there'll be another era like that, but he rode that with such verve. And I'm really glad to see everybody come together and remember him. It was a wild and crazy, blazing meteor behind which I was always delighted to see him.
Thank you very much, Paul. So that was Paul Sass. I don't know if you were on earlier when I read a quote from you. I hope you don't mind. Okay, fabulous. Okay. You can keep stalling while I do this.
Well, I have to say, like, I didn't know
Keep going.
how many cool people, like the very first BayCHI was on the Xerox Star, and you just see every single person that is important to our field. Don Norman, obviously, Jacob Nielsen, but like Jaron Lanier, I think of as one of the deepest people, but also Doug Engelbart, like Alan Kay. Like Alan Kay is the guy who his thesis in 1968 was the iPad. Alan Kay, who every time I lose a phone, I quote, because he said, look, you won't have ubiquitous computers until you can afford to lose them like pencils. And Richard knew all those people. He drew all of them together. It was really cool to watch. I was amazed to hear that Peter Merholtz was like trained or like, you know, midwifed into the field. Crazy guy. I did know at the end his life mainly revolved around things that were going on in his head. And it didn't seem like a happy head. But really, I'm so glad everybody got a chance to come together and honor Richard.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Let me do this. Let me do that. Stop. Hold on. I don't know what you're seeing. Yes, but are you seeing it on the screen, on the computer? It's still trying to come up. Keep that. Spinners aren't good. Hold on. Ugh. This is like nuts. Stop share. It says, okay, one more time. Let me do this. I just ignore that. No, you can't. They're all props. I can't speak. I have to have these props. Hold on. What? Oh, there we go. All right. Am I sharing the screen though? Yeah, I didn't think so. That's the problem. Okay. Zoom. Share screen. Share. That. Okay. This is the last time I'm going to do this. All right. So yeah, so I'm Susan Wolf. And I guess I've had the pleasure of knowing Richard for an extremely long time. Known him professionally, known him personally. Our lives have kind of been sort of intertwined for since the start of BayCHI. So I was one of the original founders of BayCHI, along with other people who were in the audience. And it was a great opportunity for us to do something in the Bay Area that was a bit special. And we, many of you might remember, like this picture of Richard's like everywhere. It was kind of what we remember him looking like, kind of just peering at us, right? I brought a prop. I brought a prop. This is, it's in the front of the room, back of the room, by the cookies, the important place by the cookies. And this was something that BayCHI gave him when he eventually stepped down. So there were some familiar signatures on here, a lot of unfamiliar, a lot of people who are not here tonight. But one of the things that I wanted to share, one of the original people who was involved with us at the start of I can't hold three things. Yeah. I can't hold three things. But one of the, I learned some trivia. Some of you, I know Dave, you'll remember, several of you will remember Ellen Francic. And Ellen reminded me, she reminded me how he got the name RIAnder. Does anybody know that? I feel like I'm teaching. I do this. Now, who remembers now? He got the name RIAnder from when he worked at Pac Bell, because that was the way email addresses were formed. It was the first name, the first initial of the first name and the middle initial, and then the first 4 characters of your last name. So that's where RIAnder came from. And Jaime, you sent me a funny picture about how he noticed it everywhere then. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of trivia, because that was all part of the start of BayCHI, and he definitely became known as RIAnder to all of us. And I guess, as everybody has shared, he was a huge influence on a lot of us at that time. The good news about going last is a lot of my thunder has already been stolen, so I can go quickly. But one of the things that Stacy and Marilyn and a number of people mentioned, Alp, you mentioned about the connecting with the world and connecting with various organizations around CHI organizations and various UX, whatever we were calling it back then, over the years. And one of the things that he did was he connected with folks in India, and he found all kinds of opportunities for me. For instance, I got to give the first ever keynote address at a CHI conference in India. I mean, it wasn't called CHI, but it was called Easy 2001. So that was the year. But I had the opportunity to go meet with the CHI community in India, which was great. He ended up going a couple of years later. And so it was just making those kinds of connections and those kinds of opportunities for people. Jaime made reference to sort of later in life. So, I mean, we've gone through a lot of, sort of his career and all of the wonderful things that he did in our field. But as several of us have mentioned, he did get to a point where he hit some rough times, and nobody really knew what was wrong with him. Or he had theories, but we had other theories. Meanwhile, he had a very, very, very interesting time of it. He did chronicle it all in a blog that Jaime mentioned. Interestingly, he took the blog down a few years ago because he thought people would think he was crazy. And so, and he thought it was lost, and he got rid of every bit of words that he wrote off of his computer. But Nancy said, "Hey, what about that Wayback Machine?" And guess what? I found it on the Wayback Machine. So if you are interested, it is, as he would say, you know, it's quite a disturbing read if you're not familiar with it. But if you want to get a sense of what was going on and sort of making some of these connections that you've been hearing about, all of the really wonderful things that we knew and love about his earlier sort of career, and then sort of what he was going through a bit later in life, this makes for some pretty scary bedtime reading. But suggest you take a look at it. As was mentioned, a number of us did ultimately sort of come to his rescue. So he wrote about the arrival of the cavalry. We all got together at UW's office in the city and started doing a number of things to try to help him. This was after Claudia had spent time helping him for a long time prior to this. So we've all had our share of supporting Richard over the years. Mentioned a bit about his car, and several of us are familiar with this car. I don't know, he and I affectionately called it the Chateau, given that he lived there in it for quite some time. This was what he would refer to as his bedroom. So down by the Presidio, he would park his car at night by the Presidio. Evidently, I took this picture when there were no cars there, but evidently at night it was bumper to bumper with homeless people, and that they were all lined up. That was a great spot for that. So that was his bedroom. This was his living room down by Crissy Field. And he spent quite a bit of time there, but he managed somehow to be industrious. Even made the cover of the Marin Independent. Right? Just so happened he was interviewed when they were counting the homeless. There was a place that he took advantage of in San Rafael called the Ritter Center, and he would go there to do his laundry and shower a few times a week. But he was, through all of this, he was actually very, very good at improvising. And we joked about Starbucks and the Mill Valley Library being his two offices, where he would spend lots and lots of time. And the Mill Valley in general, and the Mill Valley Library in particular, were very, very special to him, not just even during that phase of his life, but because of that phase of his life, then going back afterwards and taking advantage of lots of the wonderful events that they offered there. And he got very, very friendly with the head librarian there, and very welcoming to him, even during his somewhat disheveled days, but then when he, cleaned himself up. This picture, this lousy picture, you've now seen a few times. And the reason I took this picture, and I know John had to go and Dawn isn't here tonight, but Richard was very, very touched by this particular event. This happened in late 2011. I saw Kathleen Watson on the call. Kathleen made it available, made the Academy of Art University available for this wonderful event. And Richard was homeless when he was doing this. He had a 2-hour interview on stage. There were about 200 people in the audience, where he interviewed Dawn and John on, and the topic, the title of that talk was Out with the Old, In with the New. And at that point in time, he was talking about how things had to change, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But I did want to say that this was really, really a special time for him, because it like gave him himself back. For those 2 hours, he had himself back. And it was just quite a wonderful thing to see. John already talked about this. I figured he would, but I thought I'd put this picture in, and I was going to say exactly the same thing. One of his, favorite articles and probably most poignant, publications and articles was this particular one from Hugh Dubberly and Co. And as John and others have mentioned, and Jonathan had mentioned, he did become very active in thinking about healthcare and thinking about the healthcare system and how to fix a broken system. And he got very involved with various things, like this was, an event, Health 2.0. He spoke about it. So that crazy creative mornings thing that happens all over the world, not just in Oakland. He actually was on this, he spoke at San Francisco Creative Mornings about the need for transformation of the patient experience. So it's quite a nice summary of some of the things that he was thinking about early in his sort of journey. He also got very involved in sort of patient empowerment, and he came across this walking gallery, and it was the idea of really sharing your health stories. And this woman, Regina Holiday, is an artist, and what she would do is she would paint people's stories on jackets. People would bring them jackets, and so, those black blazers that we were talking about. Well, he brought one of those that's hard to say, black blazers to Regina, and she painted his story on the back of this jacket. I actually have the jacket in my closet. And it was the story. It's a bit hard to see, but here's his car, home sweet home, it says on there, among other things. Also, I'll talk about this in a minute, but he was really, a strong proponent of social media and Facebook. And he was saying, you're stupid because you never look at Facebook. You don't care about Twitter and all of these things. But he saw it as a way to learn. And he taught me that there's a lot of valuable things that you can learn. I mean, there's a lot of garbage as well, but there's a lot of valuable things that you could learn. So he got so active, involved in this. This wasn't Regina. This was another of the patients that just showing off his jacket. And someone mentioned, I think you mentioned Medicine X. He got very involved in that. Suzanne had gone to some events with him at Medicine X as well. So again, this is all about trying to really, make substantive changes in our healthcare system. This was his portrait that was taken, and when he was a e-patient scholar as part of the program, he would apply to be to participate in this and to get a scholarship to participate in the program. And he started running lots of events, whether it's about healthcare or other kinds of things. We've already mentioned, a number of you have experienced him as a student teaching through UC Extension. He also taught with John at the Austin Center for Design, and he taught at General Assembly with me as well. Speaking of black blazers and black outfits, this was the last day of one of his classes in Austin, and they all decided they were going to dress like Richard. And they surprised him and all came like this. Yeah. I said that he and I sort of, our lives kind of became intertwined a lot. What I didn't mention is that he had the habit of like working with me and like living in my house and stuff. So he moved into my house when I moved to Australia in 1995. He moved into my house there in Berkeley when I moved to Australia, and then he did live in my house. So he wasn't actually homeless for the past, once he got out of his car, and starting at the end of, I mean, he was homeless and that he didn't have a home of his own, but he was living in my house and over on the coast side since the end of 2011 when I bought my house. So when he wasn't in Austin or he wasn't house sitting for Jaime, that's where he was. So fortunately, the chateau had a nice place to sit and I didn't have to go living down by the Presidio. But one of the things that we did do was we decided that was at a point when I had sold my business and I was teaching at General Assembly, and we decided we thought it would be good to start a little sort of social impact kind of consultancy. So when you see things about OE strategy, that's what that is. So it's kind of the consultancy that I trade under when I'm doing consulting. But one of the things that we did was we started doing a number of different workshops and a number of different events. And so I like the word activism. That was something. So we ran workshops and he was questioning, our designers becoming the new activists, for instance. And so having lots of interesting discussions about that. And we developed and both ran together and independently. We've run workshops on this idea of questioning everything and the idea of how we can go about designing for effectively for social impact. And so starting to do things like that, which kind of, kept him kind of trying to work. But as many people said, through all of that, it wasn't just about work and it wasn't just about health. He enjoyed life. We've already heard a lot about film, and he loved film. He loved all kinds of music, everything from, going and talking to, some guy doing Gregorian chants to, modern ballet, to learning the Texas two-step and going to strictly hardly bluegrass and all kinds of things. Very, very eclectic kind of taste. He also got very active in a place in the city called the Red Poppy Art House. And he had lots of happy times there, knowing lots of different work, seeing and lots of different performers and being quite involved with that. And it was something that I think he truly enjoyed. But yeah, he did enjoy going to events up until he couldn't really get around much, including events like this one. So I don't know, if Jonathan, if you're still on the call, but here's a picture of him listening to you when Jonathan was at a book launch of a novel that he had written in early times. So I thought that was kind of nice. It wasn't all about health though. And as time went on, one of the things that he started to care about was more about ageism. And I think it's something that a lot of us think about at this point in our careers. And he started talking a lot about this. So this was at the I forget which Design and Diversity, Design Plus Diversity conference. He spoke about it there. He also spoke about it here at BayCHI. The very last sort of public talk that he did was on the BayCHI stage, where he also chided himself, by the way, for going back to that talk he did with Don and John. He chided himself for having called it Out with the Old and In with the New, because he recognized that that was a mistake and that, there's a lot to be gained from the collective wisdom that we all have. I think I've already talked to this point about social media, but he found it very important for all kinds of things. When he was asked once about where a student asked him where he could find a mentor, and he said social media, that there's so much out there. And so there's just lots of rich resources that kept him going. And he loved to travel. And when he couldn't travel, he loved to read about travel. So if I have a stack of books about France and Italy in my house from all of his armchair travel, if anybody would like to read them, please let me know. But yeah, travel was very important to him. This picture I took in the hotel where he passed away. It's a hotel in San Francisco. And I took this, when I found out about it, so he checked into the hotel. He was there for, oh, I should say that he wasn't staying in my house anymore. And he spent about 6 months after he left my house. And for the last month, he lived in this hotel in the city. And when I went to talk to them about the circumstances, the people there were so lovely. And they said that he was so lovely. And he had, and when I walked into the hotel, I knew immediately why he wanted to be there. It was just like so much his vibe. I mean, the dancers, fortunately they didn't take me into his room, but they took me into a room like his. And it was just so him. And evidently when he checked into the hotel, and he was there for almost a month, but when he checked into the hotel, the first thing he did was he signed up for the movie pack, so that he could watch movies and that they would bring him popcorn and, stuff, because he loved movies so much. Yeah. And we've talked about his love of France and Paris in particular. This is a picture I found. He did this whole, he was taking these pictures of selfies, right? And his self-reflection, you can kind of see him in the picture there. And he really, really loved Paris. And he dearly, dearly, dearly wanted to have his ashes cremated. Have his ashes work. No, he wanted to be cremated. He wanted his ashes to be sprinkled in the Seine. Part of them were, as it turns out. I happened to, when I received the ashes, I happened to have some very dear friends of mine come through town who were staying with me, and they were going on to Paris. And they took a little of Richard with them. And so this was pictures that they sent me from when they sprinkled his ashes, just about, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. Yeah. And this brings me back to the chateau. And I firmly believe, I don't believe in reincarnation or any of that, but there's a little kid. Oh, no, he's not so little. You see that kid? That kid up there? You see him? That's Nico. Nico's a 20-year-old who put a note on my door about 2 months ago asking if he could buy that car. And I was still in Australia, but a friend of mine found the note, and I texted Nico and I said, "You don't want it." It was sitting in front of my house for 3 years. It hadn't been driven. It had 4 flat tires. I could not get the thing started. Richard didn't take care of it. The doors didn't lock. The seats are all ripped. It was filled with water. But Nico was insistent. And I said, well, I'm not going to be back for a month. And he said, okay, well, thanks anyway. The day I got back, a week and a bit ago, I got a text message from Nico. "Can I come over tomorrow and take a look at the car?" he said. I said, sure. I said, "But I don't want you. I don't want you. It's too expensive. It's not going to work." Sure. He came over. He was the sweetest kid. He had his brother with him. They had a battery with them. They had spark plugs with them. They had an air pump, a manual air pump to pump up the tires. They couldn't get the car started. They came back the next day with a distributor cap. Aha. That was the ticket. All it needed was a distributor cap. I sold the car to Nico for $1. I gave him the $1 so he could give it back to me, because legally you need to pay, and I didn't want him to. I didn't want to take any money from him. That was last Saturday. That was a week ago. That was a week ago. This past Saturday, he came over to show me what he had done to the car. He cleaned it up completely. He had it smogged and registered and, and insurance. He ripped out all the carpeting. He dyed the carpeting black, so it was nice and clean again. He put it all back, new floor mats, painted everything. He hasn't painted the hood yet, but the chateau lives. And this kid, Nico, is such a sweet kid that I firmly believe that it's Richard. And so with that, I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight. This has been wonderful. And, so to Richard, with gratitude and love for all you've done for us all, rest in peace, knowing that you've made your mark and you've left the world a better place. And somebody else stole my picture, my thunder. But anyway, thank you so much. And now I'm going to stop sharing this. Here, do you need the mic? Do I need to hold the mic for you?
Here, I can do that. Okay. So I appreciate everybody who stuck it out this long. Thank you so much. And thank you to our hosts at SAP, Joy Mountford, whose picture I kept coming across in all the archives of CHI people that I was looking for Richard in. Here was Joy. So it was fabulous. Thank you, Joy, for making all these arrangements for us. And thank you to your staff, the AV guy, IT person who helped us figure out these 17 devices to fit together. Ted Selker, thank you for bringing in this overhead projector. What I didn't know was I have one at home, but we couldn't find it in the time available. But next time you'll know. But I did have transparency materials in a sealed box, and I knew where it was. So now, allow me to channel Richard for you. Next, I have to what am I blocking? Oh, I'm blocking the screen. Sorry, let me go to the other side here. Okay, thank you everybody for watching out for me. Next meeting, it's going to be fabulous. November 14th, that's the second Tuesday, 7:30 to 9:30 Pacific time. And it's probably going to be Zoom only unless somebody who in the range of my voice and in time wants to donate a place to us. Get in touch with me fast, please. And our topic will be a panel of language technologists talking about naturalness of language. So all these chat bots and text bots are trying to talk English or Chinese or Japanese or Zulu or whatever your favorite language is that you're working on. And how much does that fit the human sense of naturalness? And I think it's a topic that's really timely, and we'll probably be getting involved in a little bit of the automation of language as well. But mostly we're going to talk about naturalness. And how do you know? So we hope to see you then. And we want to thank Richard for setting such a great example for us for so many years. Thank you all for sticking with us, and good night for now.
Thank you.